Welcome to Native Calgarian and Mossy for listening. I'm your host, Michelle Robinson, speaking to you in Mohkinstsis in the Blackfoot Confederacy, home of the Nitsitapi, Sutina Dene, and the Yiharhi Nakota. I talk about history, current news, unheard news, book clubs, with special guests to give local or national issues a voice through an urban Satu Dene lens. My life's work will be to honor the voices of my ancestors and next generation with humor, love, and truth. Reconciliation is work, not performance. May we honor all Indigenous voices with that courage. Today is August 26, 2025. Welcome to Native Calgarian. If you enjoy hearing Indigenous content by this Satu Dene woman, my Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. For those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. Also, giving a review helps whatever medium you're listening from. I have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe. Go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. And remember, always share the things that you've learned to your network. Oki, naganago me koche chestakomaki, nara dago dekots nagotine siku saradi. My name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use they, them pronouns. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Great Bear Lake tribe in Treaty 11 in Delaney. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene nation is uninvited to this area. I'm Clincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning many big dog town, named after the Calgary Stampede. I was born in Calgary, or in Blackfoot, Mohkinstsis, as Michelle Elliott, an English name that has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. Acknowledging proximity to whiteness is important because the darker the skin, the more racism a person experiences in colonial spaces. My late great-grandfather is Milo Bewolf from Delaney. His daughter, Alice, is my now late granny. My mother and I are Northern Slavey Dene, or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act and Post status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. Through my father, I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution. Having a Canadian Indian Act and Post status card is a colonial construct by Canadian policies meant to divide Indigenous peoples' inherent rights. Indigenous Two-Spirit, or the Indigenous 2S community, and Indigenous women are at the bottom of the Canadian socio-economic ladder because of imposed policy of trauma, colonial trauma, poverty, racism, gendered violence, and land theft. I am not a social worker, nor an elder, nor do I speak on behalf of all Indigenous peoples, but I do share my journey as a Dene mom with ADHD navigating this colonial, ableist, misogynistic, racist world in 2025. I think of all of this today. I hope we honor the many Indigenous lives lost for this so-called country named Canada. I hope everyone sees their role in the importance of stopping harm, and as a citizen, see a role in reconciliation as a treaty partner. Land Back is a movement that could save the planet from climate change created by colonialism, but it would be a part of treaty partnership, meaningful reconciliation, and honoring global initiatives like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. As a former geomatics drafter, I'd love to teach you more, but you have to go to nativecalgarian.com for more. So today I'm super excited to have returning guest, Danielle, back. Danielle, would you like to introduce yourself in your way, the way you like to?
I'm Danielle English, and I am a harm reductionist and a disabled woman. I am an uninvited settler on Treaty 7 lands. I am 35 years old. I had to think about that. I almost said I was 32. I'm always losing years. I'm like, how old am I? But yeah, I currently do research work, but today I'm just speaking as myself. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody else but me. But I have bipolar type 1 and substance use disorder. And I currently am on AISH. And I'm coming today to sort of talk about that and speak about being disabled and chat with you about what being on AISH is like, and speak a little bit about some of the changes that the government is making, and just talk with you because I trust you and I know you're safe. And I thought, who better to talk with about this than my friend Michelle? So
Oh, I'm
yeah.
so glad. I'm so glad because, I'm still at, oh my God, I'm annoying myself by not acknowledging I'm disabled. right? Like I know I am disabled, but I haven't figured out how to say that because in my own head of ableism that I have to deconstruct, I'm like, I'm not disabled.
Yeah.
And this is the actual conversation that I know the folks that are in charge of this new policy of AISH and moving forward to this new acronym. They're the ones that are like probably thinking the same thing. Well, Michelle's
Mm.
not supposed to be on AISH. And I know statistically we are way underfunding AISH already because if a quarter of all the population has a disability, then we should have way more than 77,000 people on AISH in Alberta alone. That number is not even in the six figures. It should be minimum six figures, let alone getting closer to seven, because that's really where we are at as a society. But obviously, Alberta has taken a very disgusting, ableist eugenics approach to disability its entire existence, coming up to its anniversary of 120 years, and had a long history of eugenics. We've talked a lot about eugenics already on this show. My own husband's great aunt was sterilized against her will, and eugenics in the course of Indigenous people being assumed to be dumb, and that terminology, dumb, stupid, all of those things being applied to Indigenous people when that was never the case, but it was used as the excuse, along with the other experiments they did on Indigenous people. So when I think about this new policy that you basically have to prove you can't work, I just can't think like of a more torturous thing to do to a person with a disability. But I wanted to ask you a lot about this. First of all, what was it like even getting AISH? Because it is way underfunded. Like again, 77,000 people when it should be closer to a million.
Yeah, great question. And I really want to talk about that because I don't think the general public understands what it means to be on AISH. And so that's why I don't think they understand what a huge problem a reassessment would be. And you brought up a great point already, like not feeling disabled enough. And that's something I really struggled with because I have an invisible disability. You look at me and you don't know that I'm disabled. And even in our capitalist society, we don't see mental health as a valid disability. So many people say to me, like, what, you're just sad? Like, get over it and go to work. I have to go to work when I have a bad day too. Well, let's just like unpack that a little bit more. No, I'm not just sad. I experience manic psychosis. And what does that look like? And what does that mean? And how does that impact my working? So I have paranoid manic delusions. And so that works well in the beginning because what does capitalism love? Capitalism loves my mania. When I can work all the time and take no breaks and need no days off and work 7 days a week and take on extra projects, I'm a great person to exploit.
Sure.
So in the beginning of my disability, yeah, I do really well, but then I crash and I experience psychosis and I can come across as aggressive. I can be read as violent. I can be read as confusing, off-putting. And those are the moments when I can't work. And yeah, I didn't feel like I was disabled enough my entire life. I still don't think that there are people in my life who see me as disabled. I
Yeah.
still feel scared sometimes to disclose to friends that I'm on AISH because I think they would think like, what? You're not disabled. So what did it look like to get on AISH? Well, first I had to get properly diagnosed because I wasn't properly diagnosed. And, in my 20s, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which wasn't an accurate diagnosis and prevented me from getting a lot of medical care.
Yeah.
When you have a borderline diagnosis, you're often not admitted to hospital because they believe that admitting borderlines will, I don't know, increase their dependency on hospital or something. So I didn't receive a lot of medical treatment because of stigma and shame and fear. Honestly, I was really afraid of the medical system in my 20s.
Yeah.
So I stayed away from a lot of medical intervention, which looks to the government like, she doesn't have a problem. No issue. She didn't need us. So really, I had no support in my 20s. And what that meant, it didn't mean that I worked. It didn't mean that things were going well. It meant that I was exploited. It meant that I had
Yeah.
to work jobs that didn't have healthcare. I had to work jobs that I didn't have HR departments. I had to work jobs that I was really exploited at. And I also had to be in relationships that were very abusive and very exploitative. And I had to stay in those relationships for financial reasoning. So I want folks to know that when people don't have access to programming and resources, they have to find those resources in other ways that are often very unsafe. So that's what my 20s looked like. Then in my 30s, I did start to find safe harm reduction doctors, and I was able to get assessed and I was able to get properly diagnosed. And then I started receiving medical intervention and I started getting documentation. So what I would say to people who are thinking that they want to go on AISH or go on programming, start getting documentation.
Sure.
I know you may be afraid of the medical system. I can recommend some places that I think are safe. I think that CUPS is a really safe place to go. You have to be low income to go there, but that's where I get my doctor. That's where I get my psychiatrist. And yeah, start getting documented that you're receiving help. Start getting diagnosed. I believe in self-diagnosis. I don't really care what other folks think about that. I think you know yourself best.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you do need that paper diagnosis to get resources. So once I got diagnosed properly, then I was able to start reaching out and getting support. Right now, we have a huge lack of resource, especially with social workers. I definitely didn't get any help with my AISH application. I wasn't able to get a worker. There are no more AISH workers. Danielle Smith got rid of that. So I did the AISH paperwork myself. I will acknowledge right now, you need a lot of advocacy and self-advocacy right now to get on anything.
Sure.
And that really doesn't make sense because when you're in a mental health crisis or a physical crisis, you usually don't have a lot of agency during that time period. When you're very low, that's not usually a time when you want to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you do need to do a lot of self-advocation. I had to fight really hard. So you fill the paperwork out online, and then you also have to have a medical review. That's definitely a part of the process. So I want the general public to know that this medical review is not a quick thing. It's not like you go see your doctor, they fill one set of paperwork out, and that's it. I have several friends that are doctors. One of them let me know that an AISH application takes 6 to 8 hours of paperwork for the medical professional. So that's 6 to 8 hours that the doctor is working on the medical paperwork and about 3 to 4 appointments for the person. So I want people to conceptualize this. If we have 77,000 people who are on AISH and they all have to be re-medically assessed next summer, that means our medical system has to do 77 assessments that take 6 to 8 hours and 3 to 4 medical appointments. I'm just wondering how Danielle Smith thinks that's going to happen in a month. And I want the general public to know, because one thing I've learned about advocacy, unfortunately, is most people don't care about disabled people, and they're not going to care about our rights.
No.
But what they do care about is their taxpayer dollars and medical wait times. So I want the general public to know that this is going to increase wait time. You're going to want to go to your family doctor, and they're going to be burdened with 6 to 8 hours of paperwork for each one of the 77,000 people who have already been medically assessed that now have to be re-medically assessed. So we're going to have longer wait times at low-income clinics, which are already overburdened, longer wait times at doctor's offices, as well as who's going to pay for all of these reassessments? You will pay for them. The tax dollars will pay for them. So I know that UCP voters really care about their tax dollars. Well, you'll be paying a lot of money to reassess all of us.
Wow.
So this medical assessment takes a long time, and it's very invasive. I had to answer questions about, every mental health crisis I've ever had, every time I've ever tried to harm myself, every breakdown I've ever had, every trauma I've ever had, every psych ward, every emergency visit. It was a very hard, invasive process that really taxed me mentally.
Yeah.
And The reason why it's so invasive is because we were told we would never have to do it again. When I was approved for AISH, I remember calling my mom in the park and just sobbing and saying, Mom, I never have to do this again. You know, like I never have to prove to anybody that I'm sick enough again. I did it. They believe me. I'm approved.
Yeah.
And now we have to go through all of it again. So I did this medical assessment, and then it took 9 months of waiting before I was approved. So that's the process of getting on AISH. And while you're waiting to get on AISH, I also want people to understand you just have to wait. Like they don't give you any idea of when you'll be approved. I was off work for this time, so I had no clue when money was coming. I had no clue if I would be approved. It's not like the regular world where they're like, we'll give you a call. You have no clue when the call is going to come. You have no clue who is going to call you, and you just wait with bated breath. Mine took 9 months, and luckily I was approved right away. That's very rare. Most people don't get approved right away. They have to appeal their process several times. But yeah, that was the process for getting on AISH. So maybe I'll just stop there because that was a lot of
Wow.
information. I'll see if you have questions.
Oh my God, I have so much to say. Like, first of all, how classist it is, how ableist it is. And like, you and I are big on being trauma informed. It is obviously not trauma informed. And I've been discussing this when I found out about the treaty right to health, and I found out the promises that were made to us about free healthcare and such, and how, hard it has been trying to just even get an ADHD diagnosis, let alone now that both my daughter and I are medicated, we're pretty sure we have autism too. I've just had medical doctors outright say to me, there's nothing we can do if you have autism, so there's no need for you to get a diagnosis of autism, which is ironically one of the most ignorant things I can think of a doctor to say to a person. But
I've
the
also
other,
heard that. Just so you
right? Like
That's also been
it's
said to me too. What's the point in you getting it? There's nothing that's going to happen.
right. So it's such an ignorant thing to say. And yet, like doctors and the association themselves know that there are social health determinants, socioeconomic reasons why people are, not 100% on their health. So you'd think out of all people, it would be the doctors that would be doing some of this advocacy. But ironically, that's some of the doctors that are the barriers, which is why Danielle had to say, going through cups was the best way. And so far, where she is receiving the most trauma informed type of care that you can get. And I can't even understand how doctors are allowed to be doctors if they're not trauma informed, if they're not and I've tried to explain it to a doctor about being trauma informed, and it was weaponized against me in a court of law when I had a car accident, and this one lady's notes were weaponized against me by the defense. And I was so offended. I was so offended that it was written because why would I access that, visit with a temporary doctor one time trying to, get help? Like, I never occurred to me some doctor I normally never see would write something so terrible in my notes about who I am and such. So anyway, I'm just bringing it up because most of us don't get our medical documents, and you do. So, what was that process like, and how much do they love dealing with you now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, self-advocacy is really all you have. And you brought up how ableist this process is, and it's incredibly ableist. I couldn't imagine if English wasn't my first language,
Sure.
doing any of this. Like, oh my gosh, it would be next to impossible. I couldn't imagine if I was dyslexic or if I had more of a learning disability than I do. I can totally understand why so many folks don't even bother when they look at what it entails. And I also really want to make sure I make that point. I work in the homeless sector, and there's a lot of confusion from the general public around who's on AISH. I want to make sure I'm clear. You have to have a housed address to be on AISH. So nobody is on AISH who is homeless. That isn't a thing. Everybody who is on AISH is housed. The whole point of AISH is to prevent homelessness. That's the whole point of it, is to keep people from being unhoused. So when she's taking these cuts and taking money and like, I'll just be really candid. I decided to be totally open with what I receive. So I work right now. I'm doing a contracted work position. I don't want to get too much into my work because I don't want to have that be colored by what I'm saying here, but
Sure.
I work. And so because I work, I don't receive any money from AISH. Like there's no double dipping happening here. I have to send my paychecks every time I get paid to the AISH office. They know exactly what I make, and it is taken off dollar for dollar. I make $1 a month off of my financial benefits from AISH.
Wow.
No one is double dipping or taking advantage of the system.
Sure.
And as far as how much you can make while you're on AISH, you can make $3,442 on AISH. If you make a penny more than that, you are removed from AISH. So this idea that people are sitting on disability and just raking in the dough and laughing from their wealth, no, you are not doing that. If you make more than $3,442 a month on AISH, you are removed from the AISH program. In fact, because I was so afraid of this, I actually said no to receiving any raises for the next 3 years of my contract. So I actually said no to making more money at my current job just so I could stay on AISH. So nobody is getting ahead on AISH. My rent is $14.50 a month. So you guys do the math. I am always rent poor. I can never get out of poverty on AISH. So this idea that people are hacking the system and benefiting while they're on AISH is just a fallacy. It is a very surveilled system. I have to account for every dollar I make, and I cannot double dip. I chose to forego the annual raises at my job because it was so important to keep the stability of AISH, because I don't know if I'm going to make the 3-year contract.
Yeah.
I've never worked anywhere longer than 6 months because of my medical condition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even the most sympathetic, compassionate, empathetic, understanding employer isn't really that understanding after 4 missed weeks of mania. You know, usually people are pretty good. When you call in sick for the first week and say, hey, I'm having a mental health crisis, most people are like, okay, that, you know what, do what you need, self-care, get better. But when you've missed 4 weeks,
Yeah.
people aren't so understanding anymore.
Sure.
And we need to be honest about that as a society, because we pretend that we believe in accommodations. We don't believe in accommodations as a society.
You
I
know
want
what?
people
I was
to feel
shocked.
that.
My own uncle passed away, and when this was back in, I want to say 2002 ish, around then. So it was after 9/11. My uncle passed away, and I had to go up to Yellowknife. I had to take a week to go to Yellowknife and come back. And I was shocked that my employer said to me, well, how many aunts and uncles do you have? And, you can't just take off for that. This is literally bereavement. This was literally a death in the family. And this guy was that sympathetic. This isn't even a mental health crisis. This is just mourning. And for
Mhm.
some reason, mourning is not even considered a mental health crisis. It's not considered something good enough.
Mhm.
And I said, well, I do understand if you can't pay me. Like, to me, it wasn't about that, but it was very clear. You don't get to take off. We need you here. So I can't even imagine had I had a mental health crisis.
And we
I,
have
I,
to
I
be
frankly didn't
honest
even
about
know what
that.
it was in my 20s, what a mental health crisis was. What I was told, what the movies show, so different than what an actual one is. And now in retrospect, I can see where I was having mental health crises that I wasn't able to name.
Yeah. And we have to be honest about that. Like with bipolar type 1, my mental health is cyclical. And I cycle through cycles of mania and lows. And for me, I am med resistant. I haven't found meds that work. And going on meds is also something that makes me sick. I try meds for a while and I get very sick when I try them. And the meds work until they don't.
Sure.
And I can't predict when things are going to be okay and when they're not. And I want people to be, honest about my reality. If I go to a job interview and I say, hey, if I choose to disclose, which is what I'm supposed to do, it's what they say I'm supposed to do. If I want accommodations, I have to disclose. So if I go to a job interview and I say, hey, I'm disabled, I'm going to need more sick days, I'm going to need shorter work days, I'm going to need time to debrief if I get triggered, I'm going to need flexibility. If I say that to an employer and then another person walks in and they say, hey, do you need any accommodation? And the other person says, nope, I can work anything you want, I don't have any issues. Who do you think they're going to hire?
Yeah.
They're not going to hire me.
Yeah.
So if I don't disclose, well, that's unethical of me. And then if I don't disclose, I'm not going to get the accommodation. And then if
Yeah.
I don't get the accommodation, I'm just going to get fired.
Yeah.
So she wants us to work, but she doesn't want us to need accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
So we're stuck in an ever going wheel. Like I said, I have work right now. It's very specific work. It's a perfect situation that fell into my lap. It's contracted. It won't last forever. It's probably not going to get renewed. I'm realistic in knowing that. And it's a perfect situation. And I'm very scared that I am someone who will get moved to this new programming because I'm working right now. I'm worried I'll be penalized for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very scary. And there will be no appeals to the new process. You won't even be able to appeal it. So it's very scary.
Well, that's really scary. Like, and that seems like a fundamental human rights lawsuit waiting to happen because, regardless of us being disabled, like we have the right to accommodation. We have the right. We've signed on disability UN conventions. We've signed. Our Charter of Rights would be violated. Like it's a lawsuit
Oh, but
waiting to
Michelle,
happen.
only rich people have rights. Because
Well,
what am I going to do? Sue?
100%. And I think that needs to
Sue.
be said over and over again. Like us in a socioeconomic backgrounds aren't the ones that are going to be able to sue. Like this is such a classist issue. It was classist before they decided to change AISH, frankly, because getting these diagnoses cost money, like in the thousands. And again, as a native, I'm supposed to have access to these things. And then, I get a lot of well-meaning people saying, oh, you can go through this organization and this organization, but that's not the point. The point is I should be able to access it without it being traumatic, without it
Yeah,
being,
why would you want to go through an organization where you're going to experience stigma, shame, and more trauma?
yeah,
Because I'll tell you, these places are traumatic. These, like I
yes,
said, like every application comes with a deep amount of trauma. Even going into those doors, I'm sure is not a friendly place for you. You don't know what you're going to experience. And once again, we're not attacking every single person, but the system as a whole is racist. Like I work in it and I have no problem telling that. Like, yes, we are an incredibly racist system, ableist, racist, sexist. And if you are all three of those things, I can understand why you would never want to go to the system. And that's why I want people to know that no, it isn't homeless people who are using the systems. They're not on any of the aids. They can't get on them. It's people like me and even people, I don't understand the system. That's the other thing I want to highlight here is what Danielle Smith has done is exacerbated all of our chronic conditions. Because what is the biggest trigger for my bipolar? Instability, uncertainty, and stress. So she's
mm,
brought this new program in that is vague on purpose. So I can't prepare for it. I've already been medically evaluated. What is the new medical evaluation going to be about? How do my doctor and I prepare for it? My doctor doesn't know. I call the AISH offices. They don't know. So no one can give me any answer. So you know how I feel again? I
mm,
feel like that scared girl in my 20s who has no answers, no idea for my future, and no one can tell me where to go. And I finally thought I had it. And that's the saddest part is they're making me beg for the scraps that they don't even want anyways. I'm begging for borderline poverty.
yeah.
And that was like what I was celebrating. I was celebrating that for the rest of my life, I got to be just below the poverty line. And you can't even let me have that.
No. And that's
Just
the thing I can't understand. I can't wrap my head around why it is that they want us to be so poor. I remember, it's been interesting thinking about it because I remember when basically Ralph Klein cut all the mental health supports. And I remember that was when we seen a massive increase in homelessness. And people didn't correlate that because I don't know, they don't read, I guess. We knew that was going to be the outcome, right? That people would lose their stability, they would become houseless. Like we just knew that was going to happen. Then you add like I remember Kent Hare, he would go down to McDonald's every Sunday and help folks like you and I with our paperwork, accessing things. This was back when he was in the MLA, when he was still with the Alberta government, that like, he was trying to help people with disabilities, like, access to services that they rightly have every opportunity to. And he would do that over and over again. And I just can't understand why there's not a better way, a better system for doctors to be able to, access these programs. And I
Oh,
was
doctors
talking,
are so burnt out. They are
right,
so burnt out, Michelle.
right,
And
like,
this is just going to burn them out even more. You
right,
know, I used to be so much more critical of doctors, and then I started working with them, and it humanized them a tiny little bit for me. I mean, fuck the ones that are racist, but
yeah,
I have seen sorry if I can't swear on here.
absolutely, you can. I do it all the time,
But
especially when I'm mad, all the time.
what I've seen is they are so burnt out
Yep,
from the charting that they already have to do.
yep,
And this is just going to hit them and slow things down even more than they already are. Like, I really need people to hear that.
yep,
We already went through rigorous assessment. I didn't fill out one paper. I did a massive, massive medical assessment that looked at my entire life, my entire history, that deeply studied me. I
yeah,
had to be approved already. There is no need for this. No need for this. This is going to take people that are barely making it and push them into houselessness.
yeah,
And we already can't figure that problem out.
yeah,
We don't need to make that problem bigger.
yeah.
We don't. And this is what is going to happen.
I
And
know.
nobody has any time to help anybody. We've
No.
cut social workers in the hospital. We've cut the social workers everywhere. Doctors don't have time to be social workers because they don't have time to be doctors. You
Well,
know,
and it's wild. Like in the city of Calgary here, I remember them saying that they're going to change up the way the community associations are and put a social worker in every community association. At the time, I thought, boy, that sounds fantastic. But the community associations aren't always open. One, two, they're not these social workers aren't sitting in there. Three, what they really do are just like programs for like coffee and tea instead of like actually helping people who need help in their neighborhood, people
and
who we're
also, who
talking
can
about,
use a community association? Can somebody on drugs use the community association? Can
right?
somebody in active psychosis walk into the community association? Does the community association want those people in there? Like,
Right?
we are once again not helping the people who need the help
Yes.
because we're expecting them to show up in a way they can't show up, in a space they can't show up in.
Yeah.
You know, I just, yeah, I know that I am a highly, I'm very good at advocacy for myself. And so if I'm struggling, I don't
Yes.
understand how other folks are doing it. Like, I wake up every morning in fear. What
Yeah.
is going to happen? I don't know what is going to happen. And it is triggering my mental health,
Yeah.
and I want people to know I can't see my doctor already. I used to be able to see her once a month. Now I can't see her. I can only see her every 3 months. I see my psychiatrist twice a year. I would love to see medical people more, but we are already so burdened. And this is just going to increase these wait times. So if my medical assessment can't be done in July of 2026, does that mean that my benefits are frozen until the assessment is done? Because I anticipate that's what it will mean.
I'm spiraling into another rabbit hole right now, thinking of all the folks who are going to be forced into incarceration with addiction that won't be getting the help that they need as well. Because
Mhm.
if we're not incarcerated and we're not getting this help now, like what's
Yeah,
going to
and
happen with
even
all of these folks that they're going to force into treatment programs that aren't going to have the proper qualified people to be able to assess them properly and help them?
yeah, and even I mentioned my friend who is a doctor at CUPS. She has a 2-year waiting period right now to even do an AISH assessment. So you asked at the beginning of this podcast, like, how would I get an AISH assessment? Well, if you want to go to CUPS, you got to wait 2 years to even get one. So this reassessment thing makes no sense. It just doesn't. We don't have the resources already. So
Yeah.
the people who are being helped, why don't we just leave them alone? Because there's so many more people who need to get help and support. And I just don't. uh, yeah, there's so many people who need to get properly diagnosed. People who, like, I assure you, there's nobody on AISH that is laughing in their mansion collecting all of their coin. Like, it's just not a thing.
Well, and
They
I'm just going to say this to people, like the average life expectancy for an Indigenous woman is 68. And I'm already, what, 48. So 40, am I 48? How old am I? 77. Yeah, I'm 48. Okay. So that means I have 20 years left, maybe. Danielle's saying 2 years. Like, what are the benefits? Like, why would I even try to access this when I just know I'm going to be living in abject poverty? Like it's insane to me. And I don't mean to use ableist language, but the policies that the governments put together with an ignorant population base that seems to get away with like all this corruption, all of this government waste. I mean, I'll just share this. I have another friend who is in the military, and there was a time where you like had to go to the doctor to prove, yep, my leg is still amputated, and they finally cut that. But it's like, why on earth would you have such a redundant system that just like you have to be on a 2-year waiting list in order to get your 2-year assessment, to get your 2-year paperwork in? Like that is a waste of resources, a waste of time. You know, how many people do I know who have a back injury, who have like, permanent damage, permanent issues from back injuries? Like that documentation is done. We don't need to redo paperwork every few years to prove, yep, my back happened to be broken back in whatever 2005. Like that's wild. Like I don't understand the logic, and this is where my autism, I guess, and my ADHD comes out, where it's like this isn't logical. This is a waste of money. This is a waste of resources. Why are we doing this? Like nothing about this is logical to me, other than you're capitalizing and exploiting an ignorant population of voters at the expense of people with disabilities. Like it's just so wild to me. I will never wrap my head around poor government policy like this.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people have this idea that people don't want to work. And I really want to address that. Like, I really want to address that as a disabled person who didn't work for most of her life. I really want people to hear this. I've always wanted to work. To not work in our capitalist society is to be shunned. To
Hmm.
not work is to be humiliated. Most of my life, I have felt humiliated.
Sure.
It is dehumanizing in our society to not work. It doesn't feel good. It has never been something that has brought me joy. I have always felt extreme amounts of shame. I unpack that shame every day.
Yeah.
For my entire 20s, I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I had to shower with towels on the mirror because if I saw myself in the mirror, it was so upsetting because I hated myself so much because I couldn't figure it out. Every therapy session I had, I would say to the therapist, what is wrong with me?
Sure.
Why can't I be like everybody else? Why can't I figure it out? I want people to know I desperately tried. I tried every avenue. I tried so many different methods to fit into this society. I tried everything. You know, when I mean, last time I was on your podcast was a year ago, and I was just coming off of a fentanyl overdose. And that fentanyl overdose happened because I was trying to manage my mania with street pills so that I could work. I recognized that I was showing up in the workplace in a manic way that was making folks uncomfortable. So I was buying street pills to bring me down so that I could keep my job. Like, there has never been a time, and it is really a fallacy that comes from like all these old ideologies, that people don't want to work.
I
It is
know.
an embarrassing, awful, horrific feeling.
The first question people ask you is, what do you
What
do?
do you do?
What do you do?
You
That's the
know?
first question. And I have so much to unpack with that as well. The shame of not working. We chose for me to be a stay-at-home parent, but my husband's been out of work for a year. And honestly, he feels so much shame, even though he shouldn't. He should not feel shame, but he does because, and especially men, are raised so much that your identity is your job. Ironically, this capitalist hellscape, we've all been raised that way now, where it's like if you're not working, you are a waste of society. And that's how I feel Danielle Smith looks at people with disabilities. And that is so, like, it's so upsetting to me and so triggering to me what we've done as a society to demonize people with any sort of disability, any sort of difference. When, like, you watch Sesame Street your entire life and you've been told what makes you, what's why you're different is what makes you special,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, no, in the real world, if you don't act and behave like a white male, but as a woman, you're not allowed to act as a white male and you're not allowed to have the confidence of a white male. And then as a native, even if you think you're white passing, you're actually not white passing. And if you have a disability and a neurodivergence, then you're really not going to pass and be able to survive without masking so hard that it actually kills you. And that's what my
Yeah.
husband and I are finally understanding is that, like you, I've been in counseling my entire life. And I'm one of my angers I'm trying to get over right now is how is it not one of these stupid counselors, not one of them, not one doctor that I've seen thought, hey, maybe you have ADHD, maybe you have autism, maybe you, didn't get properly looked at in this way. And I've been so angry because I paid these people to go to counseling. Or they took money in some capacity, whether through benefits, whatever. Not one of them. We had a marriage counselor in our 20s just tell us outright we weren't going to stay together, but couldn't tell us why, right? So obviously we quit going. But that's the barrier is that even the people that you think will help you aren't, they have too much bias. They can't even help you, even if you have work benefits to pay them to help you through these things. Like it is so hard to get the right people to understand what's going on. And you just feel like, what is wrong with me? So that internalized
Well,
shame is what I've been trying to unpack for a year.
and that's honestly my issue with therapy and anything that makes the problem on the person when the person is experiencing poverty. Like, I'm sorry, but when you're in constant crisis and constant fight or flight, there is no amount of therapeutic intervention that is going to fix that. And that's why we need programs like AISH. Because
Yes.
if I'm constantly in the struggle of what am I going to do to pay my bills, I can't possibly work on my mental health. And I'm done with that argument in the psychology world. I am done with the idea that it is on the individual to fix their circumstance when their circumstance is poverty.
Yeah.
You cannot get well when you are fighting for your basic necessities. It is not possible. When you are in the constant crisis of how am I going to pay my rent, you cannot take care of your mental and physical well-being. And I'll stand on business with that. I'm not willing to argue with that or fight with anyone about that. I have argued with so many therapists who I would go to their office and I would say, I don't have work. I can't find work. I can't find work. I can't pay my bills. And they would say things to me like, well, opposite action that. Are there some breathing techniques we could do about that? And I would say, no, you're not hearing me. I want to kill myself because
Yes.
I don't know how I'm going to survive long term. I cannot see a safe long term plan for my life. And every single time they would deny that reality to me, they would deny it. And we need to stop doing that. Yes, people have personal agency over their healing, blah, 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 but not until their basic needs are met, not until they're no longer in the crisis of poverty. And the enemy is not substances. The enemy is not anything else that the government wants to scapegoat. The enemy is poverty. And programs like AISH help people out of that. I mean, not very well. Like, let me tell you, I had to buy one gift for my mom this month, and now I have no money, on my booming well supply of AISH money. I can't even, like, I don't drive a car. I don't own property. I don't have children. Like, it's not like I'm raking in the dough over here, sleeping on a bed of gold. But
And
yes,
I would bet if you had any of those things that AISH would somehow deny you any sort of resources then.
I mean, and I talk about this all of the time. We
Mm.
deny people who are disabled joy.
Yeah.
If you want to live in low income housing, can't have a pet. If you want to live in low income housing and you say no, this is also something people should know that I just recently found out. If you're on the low income housing list and they give you like you finally get a housing placement and you say no to that housing placement for a valid reason, you're kicked off the housing placement list. That's it. So an example of this is I know somebody who had to live in the same building her husband was murdered in,
Oh,
because if she would have said no to that, she would have, that's it. See you later. You don't want our help then? Oh, you're not grateful? So, yes, we don't allow disabled people choice. We don't allow disabled people consent. In the medical world, as a disabled person, if I say, like, no, I don't really want to go that route, that doesn't really sound like something I want to do. You know what gets written in my file? Disagreeable. You know what gets
yeah.
written in my file? Combative. You know what gets
Hostile,
written in my, yeah.
angry.
And
Yeah.
then, you know what happens?
Yeah.
We can't work with you anymore, Danielle. Sorry, this resource can't take you. So yes, disabled people don't get the right to choose. We don't get the right to joy. We don't get the right to any of that. And
Well, and
we
I thought Made really highlighted that, where it's like, look, we're going to have a new policy that we will have doctor assisted suicide, but you know, most of the people who are doing it have severe low income and abject poverty. That's something wrong with us as a society that we should like really be examining. Like that we have no quality of life for folks with disabilities. Like I remember being young and being fed this lie that in Canada we take care of people with disabilities, and I have yet to see that to be true. And I think of folks who are disabled who are doing okay. It literally is an intergenerational wealth support system that they have. And you and I
oh
know so
yeah.
many people don't have that, and that's why they are homeless, and that's why they
Hey,
do die young.
let me own that right now. Like, let me own that for all your viewers. The only reason why I'm sitting here in this chair is because of my parents.
Oh,
Like, big time, no problem owning that.
yeah,
If I did not have parents who could have prevented me from some of the harsher bottoms, if you want to use that word,
sure.
I would have 100% faced homelessness. I do have, and I even want to go one step further in being open because it's really important. My mom cooks all my meals because, yeah, I love her. If
We
she
love you.
this, I don't know if she will, because sometimes she finds this stuff too triggering, but like,
Sure.
with the limited amount of money that I bring in, I mean, not all of them, but she makes me food every Monday and drops it off, because one of the things I struggle with is caring for myself in that way. And
Yep.
also, I don't have enough money after my bills to even buy groceries. So another thing to combat the fallacy of all of the wealth I have on AISH, no, I don't have enough money to pay for my food. So yeah, my mom absolutely supports me with food. And my dad, to this day, like when I struggle with getting to work, will help me out with Ubers, and that is a huge amount of privilege. There have been lots of times in my life where I have been without a place to live and I've had to live with my parents. Like, I want to highlight that there is this lie that people who make it in recovery, or whatever the dumb word is, make it
Sure.
because they have like extreme agency. And I don't want that to be the story that I'm telling today.
Yeah.
I have made it this far and I'm alive today because my parents have a small amount of generational wealth. And that is not to say that I'm not fierce and brave and strong. Hell
Uh,
yeah, I'm those things.
you are.
But
Yeah.
that is not why I'm here. And I don't want anyone to get that twisted, because that lets people think that those things mean success, and they don't. What gets you out of it is money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Point
Wow.
blank, period. When I
Jeez.
didn't work for periods of time, they were able to help me. And
Yep.
if they weren't able to help me, I wouldn't have made it.
Yep.
Okay? I'm not denying my own. When I say that, people are always like, oh my God, you're taking away from your own story and your own success. No, I'm not. But I am being honest about the story.
Yeah.
And the
I
story's
know
truth is that.
it is hard. I talk a lot about the proximity of whiteness for that reason, because I didn't realize that once I was away from my father, how the world would treat me so poorly. With not having my white, tall dad in the room, how different the world treats me.
Oh,
I was shocked. In my 20s. It was feminism. I was like, what do you mean, as a married woman, I'm somehow lesser than my husband? And like I got to go renew my registration, but it's not mine. I was reminded I'm a third party because it's my husband's name. And I just think about, all of the isms. So in my 20s, it was feminism. In my 30s, I was really unpacking a lot of childhood trauma. Same in my 20s, feminism, my trauma, and then in my 40s, colonialism, racism. Focusing on that, and now going into my 50s, obviously ableism, and just understanding, like, damn, why do I have to do all of this research? you know, in my so-called free time in order to understand what this world is. Like I just hate that we're stuck in this system where if we were just equal to people and just kind to people, that we would be so different as a society, that you could focus on the things you need to focus on, that I could focus on the things that I need to focus on, and have people see that we would all help each other through this, as opposed to being so alone and isolated, and then wondering why we have such a high suicide rate. And that's why I get so annoyed with, like, Bell Let's Talk. We never talk about the real truth. I've seen that with recovery and such. Like I have friends who I feel, because they have undiagnosed ADHD, they're the reason why, they committed suicide sooner, why they had overdosed sooner.
oh yeah.
Because we don't have cultural supports. Like when you described having to talk about all of these low points in your life, like after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings, a lot of elders died because they were re-traumatized again, and they were going through that hell again. And then, they died,
Oh
committed
yeah.
suicide because they had to re-traumatize that trigger. Or they were triggered by retelling all of their traumas. And that's
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean about trauma-informed care. Like we just don't have that at all.
No,
So go
I
ahead.
can't imagine. Like I left my AISH application, like the medical assessment, and I just sobbed the whole way home,
Yeah.
and it was such a painful any application I've ever done,
Yeah.
some folks aren't impacted by that stuff, but I certainly am, and I
Oh,
can
yeah.
imagine,
Yeah.
what that would be like. Yeah, it is really, really tough. And now we have to do all of it again, you
No,
know,
it's not
for
okay.
for what? So she can throw a bunch of us off of it who our doctors have said, like, when do we trust doctors? Like my doctor has said that I can't work. And we just said that we look, I'm trying to work right now. I'm passing up raises so I can work. And you've brought up friends who have passed, and I lost a very, very close friend in November to an overdose. And I truly believe that they would be alive if they would have been able to find work. Like, I truly, in my heart of heart, and I say this to everybody, believe that if they would have been able to find work, in the field that they wanted to be in, they would have been alive, because I know that they were so defeated by not being able to find work. They
Yep.
wanted so badly to work in the social sector field. They wanted to help people who were using, and they wanted a purpose, because that's what work gives us. Sure, the money thing, of course, I'm not going to deny that we need money, but it's also the purpose and the validation. And I know that that was so hard for them. And I
Yep.
really believe that that is the number one thing that played into their death. And yeah, so I just really want people to hear that, like, at our core, we all want to contribute. And
Yes.
even when I wasn't working, I was volunteering every single day.
Yeah.
I was running overdose prevention sites along the river, and I was doing amazing, meaningful work, and I was running warming spaces, and I was connecting with community, and I was doing something literally every day. I was running in a peer-led advocacy group, and I was just rich in community. And I was, yeah, like, there are lots of ways to contribute to society,
Yeah.
and
I know.
everybody contributes in ways that they can. And I also want to, I know we're coming up at the end here. Yeah, my fight is for me, of course, because I care about myself, but I have a goddaughter, and she's nonverbal autistic, and I love her more than anything in this world. And yeah, we're making cuts to AISH, but those cuts are also happening in insidious ways that we don't see.
Yeah.
FSCD supports are being cut. And my sweet little 8-year-old goddaughter, what is her future going to be like? Are we going to have to beg and plead for her to get the bare minimum?
I know.
Because I don't want that for her.
No.
I don't
I
want it
know.
for me. I don't want it for her. I want you to be able to say you're a proud disabled woman without feeling like you don't deserve to say it.
Yeah.
Like, don't make us beg and plead anymore.
Yeah. I think folks need to just understand that if you are not advocating for folks with disabilities, you're literally part of the eugenics problem, allowing it to be. And I believe that in my heart. And I've always believed it. And I thought we kind of learned that lesson from World War II, from Hitler. But I just know as a society, we did not learn lessons from World War II at all,
Well,
which
I don't
makes
know.
me super sad. So,
Take a look at the UCP. They've brought measles back. Like, they love to bring
yeah,
back anything that we already got rid of.
I
I
know.
don't understand. You have
Yeah.
to pay for a COVID vaccination. Like, I don't get anything anymore. But if you don't give a shit about disabled people, I can't make you. But
Yeah.
maybe you'll care about your taxpayer dollars being spent on 77,000 people being reassessed on a 6 to 8 hour application. Maybe you care about the good doctors and nurses of the world being overburdened. Maybe you'll care about those things, because that's what it means.
Yep.
That's what an AISH application looks like. That's what's going to have to happen. Maybe you'll care about those things. And if you do care about disabled people, I want you to hear that I got my teeth cleaned for the first time in a really long time 2 weeks ago. And I didn't have to pay anything when I left. I didn't have to be in an abusive marriage to get healthcare. I didn't have to beg my parents to do it and feel like shit because I'm not an adult who can't do it for myself. And it was the best thing that had happened to me all summer, was getting my teeth cleaned.
Mm.
I just want to be able to get my teeth cleaned, man.
Mm.
I just want to
I-
be able to get my teeth cleaned.
Right, as you should, as you should. I thank you so much for coming back. I welcome you to come back as we go through this ridiculousness
Yeah,
and
please.
talk about what you're seeing, what you'd like to talk about as we go through all of this. And just know, you're one of those folks that still see me, that still,
Always.
understand,
Purple
and
haired
still,
Michelle. I love her. I love
right?
them.
And vice versa. Like it's just one of those things. I'm so grateful for the community that we've had to build despite all the barriers for us not to be communities. So I'm grateful for you.
Thank you for having me back, and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks. I just love having her on. So I'm so grateful that she came to share all of this because I think we all need to figure it out and talk about it. And even when I ran provincially, I was mad about how little that was underfunded. So, regardless, if you are a follower of mine, Reconciling History by Jody Wilson Rainbow and Rasha Danish. They are our next book club that's coming up in September. So if you've had a chance to read it, awesome. Come join us and join our book club to talk about this wonderful book. But if you are a person who are maybe looking for a book to read, that's a great book to go with. I want to give a special shout out to November's book club, Arc of the Medicine Line by Tony Rees, because it talks specifically about the Canadian US border. And I think for Canadians, and especially with all the rhetoric coming from the States, it's just a really important book to understand our history. And it was actually a Blackfoot elder who recommended it to me. Otherwise, I don't like to do non-Indigenous books, but she recommended it. And so I said, yes, ma'am. And I do what my elders tell me. So that's why we're doing that book. I want to give a special shout out to the Reconciliation Action Group, who are trying so hard to keep the conversation of reconciliation in the mainstream. A lot of you do share that information and are willing to engage. And for those who do, I say thank you. And if you have a look at my TikTok, you'll see some of the things that I talk about what the Reconciliation Action Group does. And I honestly, I'm grateful that other settlers get to see the barriers that Indigenous people actually face. And so, and why there's so many barriers to reconciliation, because a lot of folks will have opinions, but not have an understanding to it, especially if they're non-Indigenous. So my hope is everybody's looking themselves in the face, going, September 30th is coming. I'm already booked, folks. Sorry, I can't help you. And thinking, what have I done in a year for reconciliation? What were my highlights? What were my lowlights? What are things that I have forgotten about? You know, how am I contributing to the conversation? So that the 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry, of course, the United Nations Declaration of Rights Indigenous People. I sure hope at the bare minimum people are reviewing all of that information. So, Masi Cho to my ancestors, to my granny, my mom, of what strength looks like through their example. You know, I want to thank my dad for teaching me to be strong and blunt, my stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is. And, you know, I'm a second generation Calgarian through her. To my husband, he produces, edits the show. He's my husband, childhood friend, father of our child, support down my journey of the Red Road, and has witnessed decades of racism and sexism. To our child, we are blessed to learn from you. Our child is now an adult. And, you know, we are honored you chose us 18 years ago. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. I hope that my daughter and my family will be proud in the future talking about these current day issues. Anyway, honor the Blackfoot. The elders and members have been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Blackfoot. Leonard Kennedy taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Satu Dene. My humblest apologies to any of the language keepers as I try to learn proper pronunciation. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. For those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. I also have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe. You can go to nativecalgarian.com for more and lots on all the different pin posts. Last thing I want to do is a kind of a nice way to wrap up some things that have been happening here. We have Pride coming up, so I'm super excited for that. And I was asked first and foremost by Jyoti Gandak's team. So I do believe that's who I will be marching with unless something else happens between now and then. And yeah, I try not to endorse too many folks, but I just wanted to say that for folks who are thinking, who do I vote for? You know, I'm a big believer there's nobody's perfect. One, I'm not perfect, but you got to look at like most of their values and vote for that person that is the least harmful person to vote for. And so that's why I'm likely going to be voting for them from what I've seen from the other candidates. They're very much, pro police, pro genocide, pro eugenics. And we have to get past that, especially after podcasts like this. So I'm hoping people are paying attention and holding even their school trustees to account, because apparently the Take Back Alberta group is going to be focusing on school trustees. And I mean, our trustees in Alberta are so conservative that changing John A. Macdonald's name is like virtually impossible after years of advocacy and me talking on this podcast, and the CBE not getting enough engagement from, folks on that issue. Like, we are here. And now they want even more conservatism because, trans people existing is not good, and like they just want them eliminated. So this is what I mean about genocide and eugenics. Like, there's a lot to unpack with it. So anyway, I hope you all know these Calgary rabbits get the worst side eye from me, and they're lucky I'm not tradish. My cousin once said, or they'd be in our dish. Thanks, folks, for listening. I appreciate you listening.